All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. Let's get started. So I'm Mike Booth. I'm a product manager for social VR at Facebook. And what brings us all here today? The magic of presence in VR. The fact that you actually feel like when you're in VR, you're teleported to another place. What's even better than that is the magic of shared presence. When you're in VR with another person and you really feel like you're there together, even if you're separated by a vast distance. Facebook Social VR is interested in taking that feeling of shared presence and experiencing personally meaningful content together, as we saw in yesterday's keynote demo. So first I want to say, this talk is about things that we've discovered over the last year, but is by no means gospel or law. These are experiments that we've done, and we'll be talking about things that we've found, but it's an ongoing process, and as you all know, VR is the undiscovered country, and we're learning all of this stuff together. So, quick background about myself. I spent 20 years in the video game industry, and what I found when I came to Facebook is I expected to bring my game design sensibilities to social VR with the assumption that, okay, we'll need to build a complicated 3D environment, we'll need ways to navigate that environment, lots of activities to do, basically the mindset of a game designer where we're creating an experience for users to have. And as you'll see as we go through this talk today, what we've discovered is that what we really want to do is we want to focus on the people and keep a simple environment and let the people drive the experience, give them the tools to share and connect with each other. So the structure of the talk today, basically be talking about these three areas that we've been exploring. How do we create believable avatars? How do we create the environments? What is a social environment? And then thirdly, what do we do in that environment? So on the subject of avatars, again, this is not quite your video game avatar. So in video game parlance, this would be a third-person avatar, where basically you see your entire character in front of you, and you can control it and drive around. You're looking from third person. A first-person avatar, you are in the point of view of yourself. So you can look down and perhaps see your body. Perhaps you're holding a gun. That's first person. The challenge in VR, for lack of a better word, is you're zeroth person. You actually are your avatar. When you're in VR, you embody your avatar, and the other people in VR, they look at you. They look at your avatar as you. So it's really important we figure out how to do that right. Also, just a term for those who aren't familiar with it, the uncanny valley. So this is something from the film effects industry. But you can see on the horizontal axis is how much something looks like a human, how much the caricature or model looks like a human. The vertical axis is familiarity, how comfortable we are with it. And as you would expect, we start really simply, and as we increase likeness, the familiarity and believability goes up, as you would expect. Things like an industrial robot to a cartoon character. Cartoon characters are charming, right? But a very interesting thing happens when you get close to perfectly real. You plummet into the uncanny valley. So this is something like a zombie, or those humanoid robots that are wonders of technology, where they're actually creating a very human-like face with skin and eyes and mouth, and as soon as it starts to move, it looks terrifying. That's the uncanny valley, and it's very important that we avoid that area in our avatars, because that magic of presence in VR plus the uncanny valley gives you the creeps. So this is an example of a VR game, and to be honest, it's not the most high-resolution, super high production value. There are games out there that look more realistic, not in VR. But this is the first time in 40-plus years of playing a game that I had the visceral reaction of, oh my God, don't let it touch me. Because I felt present with whatever that thing is in the shadows around the corner. So while that's awesome for horror games, we do not want that for social VR. So stylization versus realism. So this is my friend Yasser Sheikh. He's a researcher at the Pittsburgh Facebook location. And he's doing awesome things with the far future of social VR, where we really can have perfectly realistic humans. But I think we can all agree that as realistic as this is, if you saw this, if you're present with this floating head in space, it would be a little disturbing. But the other thing to think about is, as this is completely motionless, how are we going to animate this? How do we make the mouth move when you talk? What do we do with his eyes? When it's this realistic, every little detail matters. How do we animate those eyes? Yasser conveniently has no hair. But if he did have hair, how would the hair flow? How would it collide? All that stuff would have to be perfectly realistic. And we're not even talking about like his body, his arms, his hands, what clothing he's wearing, etc. Another thing to consider is this one-to-one tracking, which is glorious and wonderful and makes VR amazing, which, by the way, as an aside, everyone is talking about the visuals and how awesome the displays are. But I've been noodling with VR off and on since the late 80s, and it's this tracking is what really is amazing. Back in the day, it would be half-second lag when you turned your head, and now it's just seamless. But more to the point, biological motion, right? These are just white dots on a black background, but you can't help seeing that as a person walking, because that was motion-captured data from an actual person, and your brain's wired to see that. So the takeaway from this is basically anything you stick on that head-mounted display, it's going to be one-to-one tracked, and it's going to immediately feel alive. So you want to make sure that it's not creepy when you do so. So stylization seems like a promising route. Things like, the more stylized we get, more cartoony, things are charming, they're inviting, they're friendly. These are all attributes that we want. Because the other thing about VR is it's kind of scary, intimidating tech to a lot of folks, right? You're putting this big thing on your head. There's cables and wires and all of this sort of stuff. So the more inviting we can make this experience, the better. This is huge. If we go stylized as well, exaggeration is OK. People accept it. So for instance, here you can see the arms stretching. So now I have long orangutan arms, right? So we build these avatars, and they have a certain arm length that I get to about here, and I've reached the end of the arms, but I can keep going. And so my avatar's arms will stretch like rubber bands. If I was as realistic as Yasser and I did that, the friends in the room would be like, oh my God, you just dislocated your arm. But if it's a Toon, you're OK with it. So pulling all of these things together, like the exaggerated laugh, for example, right? If that was super realistic, it would look like my jaw dislocated. But because we're a Toon, it's OK. Realism can also be restrictive in that this diagram here on the far right, like that caricature could be almost anyone on the planet. And the farther we move to the left, we get more and more specific to where at the left, that's a specific individual. So we really want to be sort of in this area. So for example, with the parts and pieces that we're creating for avatars, we don't want to make 10,000 variants of a nose, right? We want to have maybe a dozen. And if we stay in this stylized realm, then matching the right nose to something that represents you is a much easier process and much easier for people to accept as well. So I thought we would walk through a history of the avatar experimentations that we've done at Facebook and see what we've learned along the way along these lines. So obviously, the first thing is Toybox. And Toybox is what blew my mind when I first experienced it. My friend Jason Holtman gave me the demo. And seeing this floating blue head and hands, but it was Jason. Because of the tracking and the voice, I felt like I was right there with him. And my thought was, how could we make this better? Well, the next step was, well, maybe we could find a way. Can we do emotions? Can we emote? So this was very early. I didn't have an art team. This was me hacking in Unity with cubes. And basically, I control the blending between expressions by moving a thumbstick on a touch controller. So a couple of things here. OK, clearly, you can see the emotions that I'm trying to convey. But also, clearly, that is really creepy, and we don't want that guy in VR. So then we actually hired real artists, and they built this sort of early stylized human. They look very charming on the screen. But interestingly, when you're present with these guys in VR, their eyes are kind of big and spherical and just a little too realistic. And it's a little off-putting, but the mouth was also surprisingly weird because it was smooth, and the way that we initially implemented it, the mouth would just sort of smoothly flap when they talked. It was off-putting. It was wrong. One of the artists, though, sort of went off on their own and did this simple Toon experiment. Sorry for the footage, but It's clearly not a human. It's this stylized sort of rabbit-fox thing. It actually has really long ears, and when he becomes sad, they droop down and whatnot. But notice his eyes and mouth, they're just basically line drawings on top of this 3D avatar. Really interestingly, that worked well, and you even still felt like you could make eye contact with this avatar with just that simple level of detail. So we combined all these things together, and we built what we called the Rabbitar. So this is a humanoid stylized rabbit. And this is the first time we put in a body, and we did the inverse kinematic arms. And here you're seeing some of the gestural emotes, where if you put your hands on your cheeks, you automatically go, wow, or you go, yay, or you're confused. Also, there's a lot of secondary emotion. I'll mention that as well, but his ears flop around and whatnot. But his eyes are two-dimensional, his mouth is two-dimensional. And surprisingly, this also worked really well. You felt like you were there with an actual sentient person that you could interact with, even though they were a giant orange rabbit. So as F8 came up, we realized that Facebook has a policy of authentic identity. And I'm not actually a giant orange rabbit, so that wasn't going to work. So what we did is we went back to the Toybox avatars, and we did another experiment where we were decorating the avatars with markers. And we had Joyce, one of our artists at Facebook, make caricatures of myself and Shrep. So this worked well, and it worked well for F8, but Joyce can't make caricatures for 1.7 billion people. So we needed to have some way to generate combinations of faces. Plus, it's not clear how we could do this sort of stylization for bodies and arms and whatnot. So then we tried some other experiments. So the thought here is everyone has a smartphone. They can snap selfies of themselves. We could maybe have you take a selfie and then close your eyes, take a selfie, and open your mouth and take a selfie, and stitch these things together into this photo face. Interestingly, this worked better than I expected, but it falls apart really quickly, right? If you see that this is a billboard, so if there's 2 or 3 or 4 people in the area, in the room, someone will be seeing this person as an edge. You don't believe that they're actually real, and again, how would we do arms, bodies, hands, etc.? So another experiment is what we called Puppet Head. So this was trying to figure out a way to build a combinatoric system to generate lots of different faces. And while this clearly worked, and we thought, well, puppets, right? Everyone likes puppets, they're charming, right? But that guy in VR is nightmare fuel. When you see a puppet head this big with a mouth, it's just like he's gonna swallow you whole. So that was not gonna work. But the combination system did work. So then we built this character system, which is combinatoric, like the eyes and whatnot you can swap out. And you can tell from like Zuck's hair there, this is very, very close to the actual hair that we used in the demo yesterday. But interestingly, there's just a little bit too much detail that tipped this into sort of the uncanny valley when you were present with these avatars. In addition, it brought up, again, issues of clothing and realism of arms and bodies and whatnot. So we took a step back from that, and we went really stylized. So we called these guys pill heads. So all the different parts and pieces we can swap in and out. And so that evolved into this implementation of a very stylized sort of avatar, which after some iteration, we ended up with what we call Toyhead. So again, here you can see the 3D shape of the avatar with 2D eyes and 2D mouths and whatnot. Again, and we can make all sorts of combinations, but it's realistic enough that you believe it, but it's still stylized and charming. And that led us to our current avatars today. And I say current avatars because this is still a work in progress. We still are experimenting, and we plan to continue to evolve these avatars over time. So this led us to sort of a golden rule for avatars at Facebook, which is, first and foremost, you should be comfortable with how you look. When you see yourself in a virtual mirror, you'd be like, OK, I'm good with that. In fact, I look 10 years younger. Number 2, your close friends should recognize you at a glance. That's the kicker, right? So it's not about you being like a giant red dragon or a pink elephant or whatnot. Your close friends, and I say close friends, so not anyone in the world, but people who know you should go, oh, yeah, that's Mike. So these are basically the takeaway from all of these experiments. These are things we think are important to create believable avatars. First and foremost is speech. You have to have speech. It's a base requirement, so it's got to be there. It's got to just work. It also needs to be high quality. If you sound like an old transistor radio, I no longer believe you're actually really here. And then you need spatialization. So I need to be able to position you in space and know that you're talking from over here and you're talking from over here. And then the tracking is also really critical. So you've seen this before. This is the Oculus Touch tracking. But this is a window into reality. This is incredibly important. This is the thing that makes you feel like you're actually with your friend and not just an animated avatar. Now this is an example of that we learned what not to do. Never break one-to-one tracking. So the idea with this was we would do a double thumbs up and our avatar would go, yeah! The problem is, as soon as you do a pre-made animation like this, you lose all of that one-to-one tracking, and your friends no longer feel like that's you. That's just an animation that's playing, which loses the whole point of the process. So never break one-to-one tracking. And then the importance of hands. For social VR, hands are really, really, really important for a number of reasons, not the least of which, what's the first thing you do if you can't believe what you see? You reach out and touch it. But also just for socializing. This is from our F8 demo. So you can see I'm talking with my hands just like I am now. I can point at things. I can naturally gesture. You get a lot of communication out of how people use their hands and how they hold their hands. Eye contact and gaze following. So here you can see Lucy's avatar. She's making eye contact with us. And arguably, and then she looks away, right? But because her eyes are stylized, all we have to do is get close to looking at the camera, and you will believe she's making eye contact with you. That's really important, because when your friends are when you're talking to someone, you really want to feel like you're making a connection there. The other thing is gaze following is really interesting. So when you're talking with a friend and they look at another friend, it's a natural human thing to follow where that gaze is going. So having eyes that are looking at specific things gives you those social cues to do gaze following. Blinking is really important. Basically, simple procedural blinks work well. I mean, there's tuning that can be done, but as long as your avatar is blinking, you're in the right place. If they're not blinking, it looks really wrong. They have a dead stare. And of course, all of this, in reality, there's social cues with everything, exactly when you blink and how you look and whatnot. But this is another reason to stay stylized, and also you're interacting with your friends. So we're basically assuming that you're in this sort of friendly environment to make this work. Lip sync.
Hello.
Hello. So this was really interesting. So here's an example of lip sync where the lips are pretty realistic and they're blending between shapes. And this looks pretty good on the screen, but when you're present with these lips in VR, they get really uncanny. They're trying to be more real than we can pull off right now. The surprising thing is what we ended up doing is we're using replacement animation, like Aardman Animation or Leica does in their feature films, where, like with this, I can go, hello, and it works. So basically, we have these pre-made mouth shapes, and we're using this lip viseme recognizer to listen to your voice, and then we're just snapping between pre-made voice shapes. It doesn't look real, but it looks charming, and because it's not trying to be real, somehow your brain is okay with it. Emoting. So right now, we don't have tracking in the head-mounted display to know what your face is really doing. I really wish we did, but we don't have that yet. So what we're doing is we're basically doing VR emoji. So just like when you're sending a text message and you want to exaggerate what you're trying to say or make it clear that this is sarcastic or whatever, you can stick emojis in there. This is the equivalent of it. So in this case here, what we're demonstrating is one way to trigger these sort of VR emojis. So the surprise look we can trigger by putting your hands up to your cheeks. And as soon as you do that, your avatar will go, whoa. And we have a whole language of these gestures you can do. Put your hands on your head, you'll be scared, and shake your fist, and you'll be angry. Basically turning you into sort of a vaudevillian actor. But it's a way for you to intentionally put specific emotion on the things you're trying to say. Let's just skip through here. All right. So why are we doing arms and bodies? So the basic idea with this is that we're inferring where your arms actually are. It's not exact, which is why we don't show it for yourself. You just see floating hands, because your body knows where your arms really are, and if that doesn't line up one-to-one, then it feels wrong and it breaks your sense of presence. But for your friends, it's important to see sort of the mass of their body, so you feel that sense of presence. And then secondary motion, this is another thing. With the sort of limited tracking channels we have, anything we can do to add life and add extra motion is super valuable. Like, you see my glasses there jiggle a bit as I move. It's subtle, but it just adds a bit of extra life. And the more of these things we can put in there, the better. And people will learn to sort of use that secondary motion as an extension of themselves. So just to recap, these are things that we've found so far that seem important for making believable avatars. So let's talk about social environments. So again, we started from sort of a video game approach where we thought we'd be building these complicated 3D environments, and we ended up with a very different set of constraints, a very simplified environment. And let's go through why we ended up there. So we built something called the Clubhouse. So this was a collection of experiments that we had been working with in this sort of, this clubhouse area, this big open space. There's a couch to sit in. There's a fireplace. There's a second story, et cetera. And you can navigate around and teleport and whatnot. Let's take another look at that. But what we ran into here right away is when you get in there with 2 or 3 people, like one person is over there doing this, another person's over there doing this, maybe someone's on the second floor, like, hey, Joe, where did you go? And let's all do this and not this. It added this whole additional layer of complexity that wasn't the focus of what we were trying to do. So another experiment that we tried is fishing. Like fishing, we can go fish, we can socialize and hang out while we're fishing. We literally got lost in the woods. I mean, this was a beautiful environment, but I don't know if you can see, way over there is the other avatar. And when you also include, audio fall off, like, hello, where are you? I'm over here. So try and just stay together. Well, you added this whole layer of complexity that we didn't need. So another experiment that we tried is doing interior decoration. A lot of people will say, you know what I really want? I want a space in VR that I can decorate it and make it just the way I want to, and it'll be awesome, and my friends will think I'm awesome. And again, all of these things that I'm mentioning are really interesting, compelling experiences, but our goal is to connect people with their friends and to let them share their personally meaningful content. And all of these things ended up being distractions to that. So like with the interior decoration, if this is one of the first things you have to do when you come into our space is, okay, first thing you do is set up your space. Pick all your furniture, pick all your colors, do this whole interior design thing, and then your friends will come over and evaluate how well you did. That seemed like a lot of additional friction. Another thing was having professional artists build pre-made spaces. This is actually quite interesting, but it has cost benefits as well. So this is like a yurt or a tent that is designed such that the viewing area perfectly encapsulates panoramic 360 photos. So you can't see the blurry edges behind you. And you have all this lovely content around you, and it looks like a cohesive scene. Similarly, we built a yacht that is designed to consume 360 photo content, because a lot of the 360 cameras right now, people hold them up in the air and take a photo. And so what you end up is a 360 photo where if you look down, there's a giant distorted hand and some dude standing down there. So we thought we would build an environment that would hide that part and let you, see the good parts. The challenge with these is each of these environments imposes a specific context. So the yacht's great, but if I want to show you a 360 photo of Times Square, now we're sitting in a yacht in the middle of Times Square, which seems odd. And then the other thing is it requires a team to build, so there's some amount of cost there. It's not something that our end users are going to be able to do. And then lastly, okay, what do we build? There's an infinite number of things we can build, and it's not clear which scenes would be valuable. So where we ended up is focusing on just the things we need to achieve our goal. So we have a central location for interactions. Basically, we have this sort of workspace. It has predefined places for avatars to be. and that is inside of a specific space. So basically, each space is focused on one center of attention. And then this was very not obvious to me when I started this, is 360 content is the environment. So these photospheres and video spheres that you've been seeing in our demos, that is the environment. And the reason that that's awesome is because people can actually make that themselves quite easily. Everyone has a smartphone, and if there's a panorama mode, you can capture a panorama on your smartphone, upload it to Facebook, automatically gets turned into a 360 photosphere, which then you can consume in VR with your friends and just look around. And the resolution's quite good, and for a large swath of the viewing area, it's very compelling. You actually feel like you're back at that spot, and you can share your trip to Hawaii with your friends that didn't get to go. In addition, cameras just like that one are becoming more and more available, and people can create full 360 content, photos and videos, where you can look anywhere. And that really hits on the goals of what we're trying to do with Facebook Social VR, is connecting with your friends and sharing content and things that matter to you and your friends in a richer way than you could otherwise. You literally can feel like you're there with your friends in a place together that you haven't been yet, or that your friend has been and is showing you, etc. So, people first. So when we pull this all together, you can see we've got avatars, they can talk to each other, they have lip sync, they look like the individual people do. It's content that they're familiar with, that matters to them. They're not being lost, they're not being confused as to who is where or whatnot. I'm not saying that this is the answer, but that this currently hits the goals of what we're trying to accomplish. So the takeaway from this is keep it simple. People first, and showcase their social content. And lastly is utility. And this is something that, there's been a lot of, other social VR approaches. There are social meeting spaces in the video game space and in 2D and whatnot. And in general, what I tend to see is, let's make really nice looking avatars, we'll make really cool looking environments, and then we'll matchmake people with strangers, and they can talk amongst themselves. And that, to me, I want to talk with my friends. I don't know, maybe I'm an old curmudgeon, but I'm just not that interested in jumping in and talking with random strangers. So what can we do to add utility? So when you get together with your friends, there are things to do. Of course, that begs the question, what do we do? And when you ask people what they want to do in the space, they want to do all the things. We can't do all the things, at least not yet. So what do we actually focus on? Well, what do people do in real life when they get together? Well, they tend to hang out and watch movies, watch videos, etc. Maybe sit on the couch with your significant other, be browsing your social media, say, oh, check this out, did you see this post, or look at this picture, or check this video out. Or maybe casual games like cards, like Bridge Club, or board games, or role-playing games, tabletop games, things like that. Well, of course, being Facebook, all these things are interesting, but we have hundreds of petabytes of shared content. And petabyte is a lot. We have a lot of content that we can share. And what the best part about it is a lot of it is structured around things you're already interested in, because either you posted it or your friends posted it, or your friends think it's interesting. So there's just a ton of things for you to consume and share in VR that way. So again, let's go through a few of the experiments that we did around utility. And again, starting with the Towns of Trademore, this is a much more traditional sort of video game approach. And it was actually pretty cool. It's this VR board game where you're trying to take over resources that you can then use to build towers. And at night, when the sun goes down, hordes of monsters come out to attack your stuff, and your towers need to defend it. So as a game, it's really cool. And as a VR board game, it's just awesome to see all the little parts and pieces moving and whatnot. But as a social experience, it didn't work for what we were trying to do, because the players didn't even look at each other, and they weren't talking. There was too much to do on the board to get everything, to actually play the game. So then we experimented with something called Dollhouse, which was a slightly different variant on the sort of interior decoration experiment. So here you see like this dollhouse. You can grab, like a couch or a chair or whatever, and you can decorate the dollhouse. And then you can teleport into it. Zoop. And now you're inside the dollhouse. So basically it was a way to do the interior decoration easily and then actually consume the space. Again, we ran into the same things that we did with the other interior decoration experiment from a different angle that, again, this is not meeting our goals. This is a distraction from bringing people together and let them sharing their content. But this was early on, and that wasn't clear yet. So then we moved to an experiment we called Sequencer, which is basically it's a music construction game. So you have this little time bar that moves across the top, and whenever it crosses all the notes along that line will play. So everyone gets an instrument, and they can turn on different notes and build music together. And it was better than Towns of Trademore in that you're standing there with your friends and you feel close to them and you can talk a bit, but it was still, you were focused on building this music. You weren't actually talking to your friends, and it wasn't like, there was no space to say, let's look at a video, or hey, have you seen this sort of thing. It was all consuming. So that had us take a step back and look at what kind of utility could we add that would put people first and let them come up with the things that they want to do. And one of the things that we added was the space markers, which you've seen both in F8 and a bit in the keynote demo, where it's a simple marker that you can just draw in space, any color you want, and you can pick up your drawings and move them around and add other drawings to them. You can draw on your friends, etc. So it's a way to make simple 3D objects in space. It's super simple, but it's proven to be just a really valuable tool. So, as you saw, I sword fighted with Mark yesterday. I just quickly could draw a sword and swish, swish, right, and away we go. But it has other utility as well. For instance, you can play games like Hangman and all that sort of thing. But like for the F8 demo in particular, when we were working on the selfie cam, and there was the flash effect to let the audience know that we just took a picture, the engineer that was working on the flash effect, it just wasn't coming together quite right. It didn't flash in the right way. And we were both in VR at the time, and what I ended up doing without even thinking about it is like, look, what I want is this. And I grabbed the marker and I turned around and I drew like 2 axes. I said, okay, currently the flash is doing this sort of thing, and I want the flash to do this sort of thing. And I just drew this quick graph. It was spontaneous, and it totally communicated what I needed to say. So that's the sort of thing that we want more of those sorts of tools. And again, you can use these markers to create objects and do whatever you need for the moment that you're in. Another thing that we're building, and you saw a hint of that in the demo yesterday, is a generalized VR deck of cards, which is way more complicated than it sounds, because there's a lot of weird card games out there. But the goal is, hey, here's a deck of cards. Do you know how to play poker? Do you know how to play hearts? Hey, there's no one here. I'll play solitaire, right? So basically, you have this tool that's been around for a long time that lots of people know, various fun games, and they can just spontaneously have a social experience together with, basically a social lubricant, like a bridge club. People generally, when they get together to play bridge, they're not super passionate about bridge. It's an excuse to get together with friends and talk while they play bridge. Similarly, we did this experiment. This is really interesting. So you take photos, and you bring them in, and then we use our machine learning algorithms to find the main feature and automatically cut it out. So like here, we can doink, and we get a raccoon cut out. So we can automatically make these cutouts. Here's Christoph. Now we get a Christoph cutoff. We can pick that up and scale it and set it over there. So, what will people do with this? I don't know. I'm sure it will be really interesting. So, specifically with that last one, we went from photos, and we're thinking, okay, photos, well, what else can we do? Well, how about, video would be cool. We could stream video, we could stream live video. Wait, we could do a messenger call. And we realized we have all of this awesome Facebook tech that we can connect to VR and really bring people that don't have VR yet in contact with people that do have VR. And you saw this yesterday. This works magically well. So here's what it looks like from the other side. And you're just talking to someone in VR. And what you don't see from this example is the person in VR, as Mark did yesterday, can grab that image and he becomes a cameraman. He just moves it around. You want to show something, they just take a look at this and your view will change. And this is early days. We plan to do a lot more with this. As well as being able to take video from VR, you can record it and post that on Facebook or stream it out to Facebook. So here would be an example. You're on the web looking at Facebook, and this is a live VR stream that you could interact with. Another thing that we're doing along these lines of what kind of general tools can we provide is PC desktop sharing. So here you can see, they've brought up the Oculus Store, and they're talking, hey, what about this game? Look at this. My team actually has weekly meetings in VR where I may be down south in Orange County, and the team is up in the Bay Area. We all join together in VR. I bring up my PC desktop. I share it with the room. I put up a document with the meeting agenda today. We just have a regular meeting. We're talking about things, and I'm making notes, and everyone can see it. It works super well, and it's a generalized tool that people can use in all sorts of ways. So for utility, we want to allow users to improvise. We want to give them tools for social creativity, and we want to give them access to a deep pipeline of content that we have at Facebook. So pulling this all together, here's some clips that you saw from the F8 demo. So emotive avatars, and hey, let's play a quick game of cards together. Mark actually won. That was a good thing. Those were random cards. Every time we did it was different. So watching 2D videos together. And of course, connecting the outside world to people in VR. And, of course, selfies. Have to have selfies. All right.